Andre, who now, just a little bit about Andre. He's executive director of Whole Washington, raised in Bothell, Washington, north part of Seattle, attended the University of Washington, a degree in informatics, worked as a software engineer across the tech industry, including small startups like education, the non-profit code.org, and companies as large as Microsoft. His political activism includes being elected to the state and national Democratic conventions as the delegate to Bernie Sanders, um, and being the lead organizer of the Seattle March for Medicare for All in 2021. And he had a wonderful presentation to the Washington legislature a couple of years ago. Andre, you can fill us in on that, explaining um, your progress, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, and it's great to be here. It's been a few years since I presented to One Pair States, but big fan of the work you do, and I think that One Pair States has a very important role to play in the uh, m universal healthcare movement that really begins in communities in across all 50 states, and we hope one day covers every American. But I just am giving a update on Washington State. 2025 has been a huge year. We've been saying now is the time. Washington is the place. My name's Andre, as per my introduction. This basically covers the same stuff. But yes, I've always lived in Washington. I'm a Seattleite to my core, um, and my professional background was in tech. And it turns out that can have some pretty useful applications in political organizing. Um, I've been involved with Whole Washington for a long time. Initially, I kind of stepped into leadership to run the I-1471 campaign. That was our last ballot initiative campaign. And then since then, have been volunteering as executive director. And as of December, have my first contract with Whole Washington. So slowly trying to build out the infrastructure at Whole Washington to have staff. Um, Also, fun fact, I ran for governor in 2024. My website is still up if you're interested in what sort of things that I ran on. I had a very comprehensive platform that covered a lot more than just healthcare. So that was publicstackhouse.org was the website there. But you can email me, Andre@wholewashington.org, or you can book a meeting with me just right online. It's very, very easy using that cal.com link. I really try to be as available as I can to the universal healthcare movement. And I'll try to move through these slides. I have a lot here, so some of them might be a bit brief. But Whole Washington is a 501c4 political nonprofit. We have a landmark statewide single payer bill called the Washington Health Trust. It's the only universal healthcare bill in the legislature of Washington right now. We're the largest universal healthcare group in Washington, and we're really the only one that's actively building towards an initiative campaign. But we're part of a bigger coalition called Healthcare as a Human Right Washington, which includes labor unions, it includes health boards, community clinics. So it really brings us into collaboration with a very wide and vibrant coalition of wonderful organizations doing work in this space. Um, and I think it's important to set a bit of context for this year so you can really understand how long some of this has taken and how difficult the climb has been. But Washington's universal healthcare movement really goes back to 93. The Health Services Act was actually signed into law. It had the support of a governor at the time. But unfortunately, in 1995, as part of the Gingrich Revolution, um, it was largely repealed, and this very much mirrored what was happening at the national level. So you had the Clintons pushing universal health care nationally, Washington kind of a charter state to model something similar, but both of them fell apart. Um, but an organization that some of you may be aware of, I think we got some folks here, but Healthcare for All Washington introduced the Washington Health Security Trust, which was really moving towards more of a single payer design, first as a ballot initiative and then as legislation. And they introduced that every year through 2017. Um, and then in 2017, Whole Washington is founded, runs its first ballot initiative in 2018, introduces the Washington Health Trust into the legislature in 2019 for the first time. Um, in 2021, Washington State creates a Universal Health Care Commission. Um, and then in 2023, because we're so blocked in the legislature, we've never been able to get a hearing. Um, at the direction of our prime sponsor, as well as the chair of the Senate Healthcare Committee, who had been one of our big barriers, um, recommended that we introduce Senate Joint Memorial 8006 into the Senate. So that starts in 2023. In 2024, we joined the Healthcare as a Human Right Coalition. So you can see a big developing picture with a lot of moving parts, and we'll revisit a lot of these over this presentation. Um, but in 2024, well, let's start with kind of where we left things off. So the Washington Health Trust, despite having been introduced since 2019, was denied a hearing yet again. Um, Senate Joint Memorial 8006, it makes it through the Senate, but it doesn't get a floor vote in the House. So we're coming off of two kind of legislative misses. Um, we do get to present to the Universal Healthcare Commission 3 times. Um, and so Mike mentioned those, and those are available on our website. And that really helps us build political capital, support in Olympia. A lot of people clearly did not really understand how well developed our policy was. Um, we also had a town hall road trip, and a few of our board members and volunteers were running all over Washington State, held 24 town halls across the state of Washington, including in some pretty rural, fairly off the beaten path parts of Washington, the peninsula, eastern Washington. Um, so this was not just Seattle, this was not just the I-5 corridor. Um, we took the feedback from the commission, from these town halls, from our community network, and we wrote a new and improved Washington Health Trust. And then, as a part of that coalition, healthcare is a human right, we were able to get the Washington Health Trust added to their legislative agenda. So it was no longer a whole Washington push. It was now being pushed by a coalition of over 30 members, a very powerful coalition. And that, again, was very important to the progress that we made. We also got some really, really important updates. So, the Washington State Democratic Party, we had been organizing legislative districts and had gotten counties and districts to endorse us in the past, but we got the state party to endorse us. And that really, really created a sense that this was something that the governing party of Washington, we are a Democratic trifecta. So the Democrats have the votes to pass this if they are committed to it, and we have the endorsement of the party now. We also got our first labor endorsement. So this is the Society of Professional Engineering Employees in Aerospace, SPEA. They represent Boeing engineers. Boeing is a huge employer in Washington. So it's not just our first labor endorsement, it's a major labor endorsement. And we are working to build further support from here. Um, so kind of going back to how did some of this get started with the commission? Well, um, I mentioned that Joint Memorial 8006. This all basically started in a meeting in 2022, I think, or maybe early 2023. But it was a small meeting between our prime sponsor, Bob Hasagawa, the chair of the Healthcare Committee, Annette Cleveland, um, our ally, Healthcare for All Washington. And we sat down, and let me tell you, it was not the easiest meeting. It was a little bit contentious in the air. We had not really spoken before. And this was an opportunity for us to really start to get to know each other. I made our request for a public hearing on the Health Trust very clear, and the chair of the Healthcare Committee made it very clear that she did not intend to give it one. And she said that this was in part because she didn't want to get ahead of the Universal Healthcare Commission. So we requested, could the commission look at our bill? And so she and Bob, they drafted this letter that you see to the commission saying, can you please take a serious look at this bill, run some analysis on it? And so in 2024, they published their first analysis report. It didn't identify any areas of misalignment with the work that they're doing. So theoretically, the Universal Healthcare Commission is on track to recommend something that looks like universal healthcare. And so far, they have not found any disagreements with our bill. Everything they looked at was an area of either partial or full alignment. Now, the drawback was that this analysis was incomplete. There was a number of areas where they said we can't really say if we agree or disagree because we have not yet made a decision about these things. The other thing was that by the time the analysis was complete, our bill was dead in the legislature. Um, and so what we've done is working again with the senators Cleveland and Hasagawa. We have basically reiterated this request and said, can you please update your analysis to reflect the latest version of the bill? And can you complete the analysis by the end of the calendar year? And what that will do is that will put us in a position in 2026 to go back to the legislature with a complete analysis because the bill is alive for 2 years. So our latest version of the bill is active through 2026. And so if they finish this analysis by the end of the year, we will be able to use that in our legislative advocacy next year. Um, so as I mentioned, we have a new version of the Washington Health Trust. It was introduced this year. So this is the start of our 2-year legislative cycle, which meant the bill had to be rewritten and reintroduced with a new bill number. But one thing we did was we took that incomplete analysis from the Universal Healthcare Commission, and there were certainly some good ideas in there. So we incorporated them as best as we could into the latest version of the bill. And that helps us not only improve the bill, but build greater alignment with the work that the commission is doing so that we're not off doing our own thing and contradicting the commission and instead can say, we're really working on universal health care together. Washington State is committed to this, and we are here to support that. We incorporated feedback from those town halls. So we heard from the business community, we heard from providers, we heard from all sorts of people impacted by the healthcare system, and we were able to incorporate some of those ideas into the bill. One of those groups was called FLAIR, and they really advocate for healthcare rights and rights for people, irregardless of body size. And so that included a full legal review and some new language. And this really helped us get the bill included in that Healthcare as a Human Right 2025 policy agenda. So that was voted in January and really put us in a stronger position as we reintroduced the bill early this year. This is a high-level overview of the changes. So we synthesized the language from the commission bill, that's 5399. So that was the bill that created the commission. We took language from that, and then we sort of combined it with language from our old bill 5335. We added some of those protections for people regardless of body size. We increased the protections for pre-existing conditions under the event that the Affordable Care Act would be repealed. We changed the governance board to ensure that it would have a citizen majority, frankly, because we were a little bit unhappy with what we were seeing from the agencies and legislators that were on the commission. We created a smoother transition plan that would kind of ensure that it happens both not too fast, but also not too slow, and puts a definitive date on it. So we can say with confidence that the transition plan is completed in 2 years. We made the business hardship waiver program permanent, and we updated the financing mechanism to be more progressive. And then there were other small innovations and improvements, some of which we may get to mention. But I think the financing is the most interesting part, the part that most people will care about. So the Washington Health Trust has always been funded by basically two major revenue sources. And the first is an employer assessment. So we would basically, instead of paying a private premium to an insurance company, they would instead pay an employer assessment to the state of Washington. They could deduct up to 2% of that from employee payroll. That same 2% goes to sole proprietors. And then we had a chunk to capital gains. And so what we did in this version of the bill is we made this employer assessment based on the profits of the business. And so we take that same 10.5% on the largest businesses, that's the standard assessment. But Washington State has what's called mini businesses and micro businesses. And so we basically took the definition of those businesses and said, if you're a mini business, we reduce that to 6.5%. If you're a micro business, 4.5%. Keep the 2% deduction on employee payroll. And then on capital gains, this is a little bit complicated, but Washington had what's called a uniformity clause in its constitution. That basically means that all taxes have to be flat and are very limited in what they can exempt. But because of some court rulings, Washington introduced actually a capital gains tax for the first time. And then that was actually taken to ballot, and the voters confirmed that they wanted to keep that capital gains tax. And so this dramatically changed what we understood we would be able to exempt from capital gains. So instead of taxing gains above $15,000, we don't tax any gains until you hit $200,000. And this really, really exempts all but the highest earners through capital gains. Um, so this shows that business assessment. You can see based on different employee pay that the assessment is higher or lower. And then on the size of the business. So uh, really, this is very competitive with what employers pay for insurance, but it flips it over. Right now, large businesses pay the smallest percentage into healthcare, and small businesses pay the largest percentage. And this ensures that smaller businesses will pay a smaller percentage of their payroll, while larger businesses will be expected to contribute more than they currently do. Um, this is the capital gains. So right now in the existing capital gains, there's a 7% that goes to education above $250,000. We keep that. We don't touch that. We just lower that floor down to 200,000 and tax it at 5% to go to healthcare. And then above 300,000, we add an additional 2%. So you can see we're basically starting at 5% at $200,000 and taking little 2% steps upwards every $50,000. And so this, we already have a capital gains tax in Washington, and this represents a very, very modest increase to fund healthcare. Um, these are a few other innovations and improvements. I don't think I'll touch on all of these, but I think one of them is just that part of how we integrate Medicare into the Washington Health Trust, even if we don't yet have federal waivers, and we certainly want federal waivers so we can fully integrate it. But we intend to put a public option on the Medicare Advantage exchange so that Medicare enrollees can get the same level of benefits that everyone else would get. They can get their dental, vision, hearing covered, but instead of enrolling into a private plan on Medicare Advantage, they would enroll into a state plan. And so this helps us deprivatize Medicare. It helps us include Medicare enrollees in our state universal plan. But instead of referring to it as Medicare Advantage, we refer to it as Medicare Part C and D. And this is for optics reasons, but also to make it clearer. We're trying to distinguish ourselves from the privatization that's happening on the Medicare Advantage exchange and make a point that this is a truly publicly funded and publicly administered alternative to private insurance through Medicare Advantage. Um, so this slide was in the presentation that I took to Senator Cleveland and Senator Hasagawa. And this was in 2024, and this was kind of setting the stage for what we wanted to happen in 2025. So at the time, we said we were thrilled to be reintroducing the newest and bestest Washington Health Trusts into the Senate. We are working with our coalition to find a sponsor for the House. We were asking to present these updates to the commission. We were asking that they would revise their analysis on the Washington Health Trust. We were respectfully requesting that we get a hearing in her healthcare committee. And that our goal here was to really provide a peaceful and political answer to people's desperation, as seen through the election of Donald Trump, as seen through the murder of Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO. There's no question that this year started and continues to have a lot of desperation out there. And we wanted to provide a peaceful and political answer to that. And I think that we owe a lot of our progress to that as well. Um, and this was kind of a reframing of the equation that we put forward. We did not want people to think of this as whole Washington's universal health care, and instead to make a point that this is Washington's universal health care bill. It's backed by a coalition, not just Washington State. That's healthcare as a human rights logo. And that it's not something that is just in the Senate, but instead something that would be in both chambers and that we would be pushing on the commission, but also that the commission is helping us push on the legislature And at the same time, the legislature is using the commission as a resource. They're asking questions. They're saying, what do you think of these policy ideas? So it really is making the point that this is on all of us. We all need to be pushing on all fronts. And it's a collaborative group effort to achieve universal health care in Washington. It goes across the legislature and the agencies and the public. Um, and so we were absolutely thrilled to have easily our most successful legislative year so far. So, starting with the reintroduction in the Senate, since 2019, we have only ever been in the Senate. But this year, we got a record of 11 out of 49 co-sponsors. We've never had more than seven. And in fact, we had lost co-sponsors before. So we were down to five in 2023. And this year, we were able to get 11, including two members of the Health and Long-Term Care Committee, including an economist at Western Washington University. So not only did we have more co-sponsors, but we had more powerful co-sponsors. But then a little later in the year, we were able to get the historic debut of the Washington Health Trust into the House by freshman legislator Lisa Parsley. So she's new to the legislature. She's already taking incredible leadership. She's a veterinarian by background. She's on the healthcare committee in the House, which means that she's in a very powerful position to advocate for this bill. And we got an amazing 17 co-sponsors. It's honestly higher than we were expecting. And it included, I think, three members of the Health and Long-Term Care Committee. It included a member of the Appropriations Committee, the prime sponsors on the Healthcare Committee. So incredible progress. We had been largely ignored for many years because everyone would say, well, you're only in the House, you don't have a hearing, so why would we take it seriously in the House when you're only in the Senate? Now we were in both chambers, which really put us in a position to push on every single legislator. So nobody kind of had an out to be able to push to somebody else. Um, what comes after introduction? Well, before it can get a vote, it needs a hearing. One thing that's great about being in both chambers is if you're blocked in one, you can turn to the other and say, "What about you?" So, um, we have been denied a hearing by Senator Cleveland in the Senate for many, many years, but there was a new chair in the House, Senator Bernowski, and we now had a bill to present to him. So we were able to basically make this request to both chairs. And part of the way we did this was we sent a coalition letter through Healthcare as a Human Right. We cited the state's own research that they had conducted that showed that this would save a ton of money. We made our request for a hearing very, very clear to both chairs. We gave them a deadline for a response, and then we collected signatures from as many organizations that we could get. And you can see a lot of very, very powerful organizations in Washington sign this letter. And unfortunately, we were denied a hearing by both chairs, but to her credit, Chair Cleveland did give us a response by the deadline. She emphasized that she did not want to give constituents false hope for a bill that was unlikely to advance to a vote. She said that because we're having a very, very tough budget year in Washington, that bills with large fiscal notes would not be considered. Cited federal cooperation as a primary roadblock. Said that the Healthcare Commission still had to finish their work and recommend something before she'd give it a hearing, and then said that our joint memorial really had to pass before she would take this further. Now, we disagree on many of these points, and we are continuing to work to stay in dialogue with her. And one thing that we're going to be pivoting to is if we can't get a hearing this year, and the time for that has passed, that this summer we can still get a joint committee work session, which is very similar to a hearing, but there wouldn't be any vote associated with it. So this gives us a platform to really speak with legislators, hear their concerns, answer their questions, have our day in court, and hopefully will position us better for a hearing in 2026. But our joint memorial still was alive and it still did have a chance to pass. So it was introduced in 2023 as 8006. This year it was reintroduced as 8004. And basically what this is, it's a resolution, not a law. And so that removes most of the barriers that we hear about. There's no money associated with it. Courts can't challenge it. And so all it really is an affirmation that Washington wants to achieve universal health care. And it gives our legislators a way to show that we have a sort of good faith partnership in this goal. And it does basically three things. It affirms that commitment to universal health care and requests federal partnership through passing federal legislation like Medicare for All, or removing the federal barriers to state-based universal health care by passing the State-Based Universal Health Care Act, or barring that, at least granting Washington the federal waivers that we need to use the federal money and integrate programs like Medicare. So in 2023, it passed the Senate, stalled in the House Rules Committee. In 2024, it passes the Senate again, and it gets scheduled for a vote in the House, but ultimately it doesn't receive that vote. They say that they didn't have enough time. In 2025, it made it through all of those committees again, and on the no, the second to last day of session, on a very, very late night, 11 p.m., it was the last bill called to the floor. And it didn't go through without some debate and contention, especially from Republicans, but it passed on a nearly strictly partisan vote. There was one dissenting Democrat, but it passed quite comfortably. And so, after 3 years of work and many, many phone calls and public comments in Olympia, Senate Joint Memorial 8004 has passed. Washington has affirmed that commitment to universal health care. We have sent this formal request to the federal government for partnership on this, and we can really, really focus on what we can do next in 2026. So that includes that joint committee work session that I mentioned. Again, Senator Cleveland, it was her who said that it was very important to pass the joint memorial to do this. Well, now we've done that. It's her who says that the commission needs to finish their report. They should finish it by the end of the year. Um, and so we think that we are in a good position to push for that public hearing again in 2026. It still may be a long way from a vote. It still may be a long way from a majority, but the hearing is what comes next, and we will be pushing for that in 2026. We continue to push for more union support. We have several union events, and we're actually inviting Rose Roach of the Labor Campaign for Single Payer to come speak in Washington on May 6th to many, many labor unions. So we hope that we can pass a resolution through the Washington State Labor Council this summer. We are building towards our next ballot initiative campaign. That's a big goal. And we have to grow a lot from here to be able to succeed. But if we're targeting an even year ballot so that we can really have the benefit of high turnout, we would be targeting the 2028 ballot, which means gathering signatures in 2027. That gives us a couple of years to build the infrastructure. So training, 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 fundraising, fundraising, fundraising. And we actually have our first Universal Healthcare Gala coming up on May 17th. We hope that One Payer States will be a sponsor to that gala. But it should be a really, really wonderful evening, and it should be our biggest fundraiser that we've ever had to date. So, uh, Oh, also, one thing that we're doing right now to build support for that initiative is our Pledge to Sign campaign. So this is very similar to a ballot initiative. We ask for all the same information that you would have to provide in order to sign a real initiative, but you can do it on our website at wholewashington.org/pledge. This is a training tool. This is a tool to build public awareness. And when the actual initiative comes, we'll be able to send a message to every single person who's pledged and said, here's how you sign the real initiative. So the more pledges we get, the easier it will be to collect the signatures and make the ballot. So thank you for hearing me out today. I know that that was a lot, but with whatever time we have left, I'm happy to answer any questions folks may have.
Andre, I have a question. This is Barbara Harrison from Ithaca, New York.
Mhm.
How well have you been able to get information out to people that don't I shouldn't say, that wouldn't ordinarily hear about this issue? I think that is so critical. And have any of them come into the movement?
Sorry, if I can just kind of try to reiterate the question. The question is, how do we get the word out to people who are not natural allies and get them to know about it, but also support it?
Yeah, how well have you done that? Yes, that's fine.
hmm Um, Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the first thing is you just have to make sure that your doors are very open. So you have to be very, very accessible, and you have to make sure that, you have a phone number on your website, but also there's somebody there to pick up that phone. Um, you have to go out into those communities. So it's not enough to just wait for them to come to you. So our town hall road trip was a huge part of that. And I think one thing that you'll find is that you're often surprised. So here in Washington, you often expect this is a progressive issue. I'm sure that it's all happening in Seattle, right? And the reality is, sometimes in Seattle, people are busy. They got other stuff. There's a million groups with a million issues, and so we would do town halls in Seattle, and sometimes turnout might be surprisingly low. Not because people don't support it, but because they're kind of like, of course we support it. Do we really need to have a town hall about it? Then you go out to the peninsula, or you go out to rural Washington, where there's a huge shortage of doctors in hospitals, and the prices are out of control. And you think, well, here we are in red Washington, right? Who's going to support universal health care here? And the room is filled, and you're shocked at how attentive everybody is to the ideas. So I think that you have to not write people off before you have the conversation. You have to be ready to hear criticisms that you may not like, criticisms that you don't agree with and think are really poorly informed. And then with empathy, and with patience, really talk through the issue. And I think that uh, oftentimes it's expecting too much for somebody to flip right there in front of your eyes, but that doesn't mean that they haven't heard you. And so uh, making your case, politely and confidently and passionately, not giving ground, right? Sometimes you will hear people say, I'm not going to support this because taxes. I refuse to pay another dime in taxes. And it's really tempting to say, no, 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 I'm not, this isn't going to cost any money. But I think it's actually important to say, you know what? Um, Taxes pay for important things. And uh, it's about who's taxed and it's about what does it pay for. Do you want your taxes going to subsidize a private insurance company, or do you want it paying for the health care of you and your neighbor? Um, and so I think that there's a lot more work to be done, of course. We still have yet to get, for instance, a Republican co-sponsor on the bills.
Mhm.
I think the legislators are harder, but the rank and file people are open to this.
And do you use storytelling at all?
Yes. I think that, when it comes from somebody like myself or whole Washington leadership, we often make a fairly academic case. But when it comes to our volunteers, the people who just come into our organization, we often tell them that their story is one of the most powerful things that they can add to this movement.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Thanks so much, Andre. Really, really excellent, thorough, well analyzed, articulated presentation. And congratulations on the breakthrough with the Senate Joint Memorial. It was a pleasure to be with you at dinner the other night at Cello's in Ballard. I'm back in DC now, and just really grateful for the work that you're doing and the leadership you're showing, and building out that partnership, that large coalition. Let's see if other folks have questions. If people could use their hand raising thing, I have a few things. Okay, Linda, I see your hand going up. You're first in the queue. Linda, anybody else? Do people know how to do the hand raising function? Hit the react button at the bottom. That's the way to do this. But for now, let's go with Linda. Linda, where are you from and what's your question?
I'm from Spokane, and I was interested in Andre saying that we have a capital gains tax because Bob Ferguson is not going to allow a capital gains tax to help our terrible budget default.
Well,
So
fortunately,
Was
sorry
is
to
it your
cut you off
question?
there.
Let Linda you finish. Yeah.
I just don't, where does that capital gains tax come from? Because Bob Ferguson says we aren't going to have one.
So, fortunately, Bob Ferguson doesn't really get say on this one. The capital gains tax was passed under Jay Inslee. It exists. And so what Bob Ferguson has been against is a wealth tax, which is slightly different, but that would be a new tax um, that is still under development by the legislature. It would need new laws that get signed. Um, but what we're talking about is building off of the existing capital gains tax, and so that is quite a bit easier. It's a relatively modest increase, but I think you're correct in pointing out that there is a reality in that any new legislation has to be signed by the governor. The resolution did not need to be signed by the governor, but the full health trust would need to be signed by the governor. And I think that it's a matter of political pressure. You know, it's one thing to say I don't support raising taxes. People don't like taxes, but to say I'm going to veto universal health care. I'm going to veto health care for the 500,000 people who don't have it. I'm going to veto health care that the people of Washington just organized in order to pass. That's going to put him in a much harder position. He doesn't want to be the guy who vetoed universal health care. But the other thing is, if we pass this by the initiative, it does not need a signature by the governor. So if it gets to the point where it has been vetoed by Bob Ferguson, that will all but prove that we do need to take this to the ballot and will give us the fuel and the strength we need to win on the ballot.
Can I ask you another question? Uh, how do they figure out what the capital gains tax is? Because we don't have a state income tax, so you don't have to file a state income tax return. So how do they know who has to pay capital gains tax?
Well, generally speaking, there are some things that the government is good at and some things that the government is less good at. But taxes tend to be something that the government is pretty good at. You know, the capital gains tax, first of all, it was a transaction tax, right? So when you buy or sell stocks, right,
Yeah.
there are receipts, and that's how they really assess it. But I think even when we're talking about a wealth tax, which often is said as, oh, this is how are we ever going to know who has to pay what? It's really not that complicated. Everyone who pays a property tax in Washington is paying a wealth tax. You're paying a tax on an asset that you own. You didn't sell it. You just pay it because you own it. And they have people who assess the value of your assets, and then they say this is how much you owe. So it would be very, very similar for any kind of wealth tax.
Thanks.
Thanks, Linda. It looks like Jeannie Nicholson, Senator Nicholson from Colorado, has got her hand up. Jeannie, you want to unmute?
Thank you, Chuck. Andre, I'm sorry I missed the earlier part of your presentation. I was tied up in a Zoom meeting to raise funds for the healthcare analysis efforts we're going to undertake in Colorado. So I have a good excuse for being late. My question for you is about the word tax. I have been told by an attorney who is working for um, a enterprise in Colorado that is owned by the people of Colorado that provides paid medical and family leave in our state. That because the people are charged for this service, but it is earmarked specifically for paid medical and family leave. It is technically called a premium, and that his advice is that we begin to clarify that for our supporters and for people who would consider supporting us if they understood that what we're talking about is instead of paying the premium to your private commercial health insurance company, you would be paying a premium to this publicly funded, privately delivered fund, for example, in Colorado.
Uh, well, I'm not 100% sure I know what the question is, but I will say that we the capital gains tax is a tax, and that's just what it is. The employer side we tend to refer to as an employer assessment, um, and that is to make it maybe a little bit more similar to what they pay now, right? They pay a premium. So we call it an employer assessment. I think a lot of this comes down to framing, and there may be times where we call it a tax, and there may be times where we call it an assessment. Um, but I think the point that we try to make is that one, it's not necessarily that much more than what they pay now, and two, that it's going to um, fund healthcare for employees and really take a lot of the administrative burden off of them. By the way, I wanted to start by saying thank you for your public service and the work you're doing in Colorado on this. Very, very important. A lot of our work has been based off of funding studies and stuff that the state has run. So it certainly does help the advocacy work out there. Did that answer your question, though?
Yes, I just wondered if it's okay for us to call it a premium instead of a tax because it's earmarked.
I think it should be, and I don't know Colorado law, but I think your attorney is probably going to give you better legal advice than us. But yes, in our bill language, we call it a healthcare assessment.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jean. Yeah, thank you for your questions. Anybody else? I can't see everybody on the screen, so if you have your hand up and you're off screen, go ahead and
Can
just speak up. Let's see. Where are we? It looks like Bobby Hall. Bobby, where are you from and what is your question?
I'm from Corvallis, and I just wanted to recognize Rich Legue, who was a co-founder of our organization here many years ago, and he worked with Betty. The two of them were the founders of our organization, and then due to a family emergency, a change in his lifestyle, he had to leave Oregon. But hi, Rich. It's really good to see you. And it'll be good to work with Washington State.
Thanks, Betty. That's
Yeah.
Bobby.
Yeah. Rich, do you want to just say a word or two about your coming back into the fold here, perhaps?
Well, I've been trying to follow what One Payer States has been doing right along. And, I've been mainly working with Healthcare for All Washington up here. So I'm just part of the troops. And I'm really impressed with what the presentation that Andre did today. So thank you, Andre.
Well,
Great.
thank you, Rich. I also want to give a shout out, one to Oregon for being a bit ahead of us, in my opinion. And I think that that helps us put pressure on our state to kind of keep up with Oregon. And I think we both know that universal health care will be more successful in each of our states if done together. Um, and then the other shout out I wanted to give, just because I saw Senator Marilyn Chase here. And Marilyn was on the board of Whole Washington, has been a really wonderful and powerful advisor to Whole Washington. And I haven't spoken to Marilyn since. We passed the joint memorial 8004, but Marilyn was in the room when this memorial was first conceived. And so it's been a 3-year journey getting it done, but I'm just so proud of all of us. So thank you for being here, Marilyn, and thank you for helping us pass our first bill. I mean, it really, at times, it feels easy to say it's just a resolution, who cares? But on the other hand, passing a bill is really, really hard. And we just passed our first one, and it really, really sets the foundation for us to pass more from here. So huge accomplishment.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. And from our Pennsylvania experience, we got an economic impact study resolution passed with Republican support. And hopefully that'll be the case in Washington State and Colorado and elsewhere. Because if folks really want to know the economics, let's get that done. Absolutely what you're doing. Marilyn, your hand is up. And then we need to pivot for a few minutes just to take care of some internal business with One Pair States. So Marilyn, if you can come up and just offer your thoughts. Let's see, where are you? Are you
I
muted?
can't hear you for some reason though. And you're not muted, so maybe your mic isn't working.
Let's see, Marilyn. Mike, can you see?
I think that's on her speaker end because she's not muted.
Okay. Well, Marilyn, if you could just drop a little note in the chat as we
Hmm,
pivot here for the remaining few minutes of our monthly meeting. And I just want to extend again
hmm,
gratitude for all the work that folks are doing across the country, but in particular Andre's
hmm.
leadership and work today through whole Washington and healthcare is a human right. And it's radical persistence. I think you've got a very good temperament, and you've got an excellent strategic mind for this work, and that's really what we need to be doing. I would love to have a little bit more exploration, maybe at another time, because we have to get a couple things done here. But the interfacing with the Healthcare Commission in Washington State, in a word, do you feel that that relationship is getting stronger between the organization forces, the legislature, and the commission itself? Do you feel like things are coming more into sync or getting a little bit more fluid? The communication lines are better, building trust, respect, that kind of thing?
Yes, it is. And I think that the first thing we really had to do was earn their respect. And I think that we largely have it. One of the most promising things that's happened with this commission is actually we have a new insurance commissioner in Washington. She was actually formerly a co-sponsor of the Washington Health Trust, and she has described herself as immovable on the question of universal health care. But as the insurance commissioner of Washington, she actually gets a seat on the Universal Healthcare Commission. And the former insurance commissioner would always send a delegate. But Patty Kuderer has made a point to sit on the commission directly. So she has helped build some of that bridge and to bring some of the urgency. I think we have a very good relationship with the commission, but the efficacy of the commission is still what's kind of under question. They have been around for about 4 years now, and I think we have been hoping to see quite a bit more from them. Um, it seems like the pace of progress has increased in the last couple of years, but we're still hoping to see something a little bit more substantial out of them. And I think that whether or not the commission will ultimately deliver on its goals remains to be seen. But as long as it exists, we see it as a matter of course that we would be monitoring them, working with them, and making our case to them as best we can.
Terrific. Thank you for that. Marilyn, it looks like you're available. Can you just pop up real quick? Are you unmuted? You're now, yeah. So
Still don't seem to be able to hear you,
see if you
unfortunately.
can play with the volume switch on your computer. Maybe that might work.
Or you
My
might be able to select a different microphone.
microphone. Oh, this is too bad.
Yeah. Well, Marilyn, you're with us in spirit, and we love you. If you're in a place to just drop something in the chat, if you want to just add a remark here. And I'm also just putting a pitch for the work that we do, to donate to the work that we're doing. And of course, what we do at One Pair States is to support all of our allied partners across the country. So, all of this it's collaboration, it's teamwork, it's sharing, it's learning, it's building strategy. And if I could in the remaining few minutes here, just to say that that I have been working and continue to work on a parallel track, building out a more effective strategy to deal with the peril of our times, right? I mean,
Mm,
we need to see and understand that with this, my view has always been that January 6, 2021 was the start of a fascist coup. It's been ongoing. It hasn't stopped, much as people might want to just wish it away or deny it or frozen in place, as is much of the Democratic Party. And the Republican Party is largely complicit here. But the reality is that we as citizens need to focus on the work we're doing in healthcare, but at the same time recognize that our issue intersects with every other issue, including our terribly weakened democracy, our democratic institutions that are under assault. The courts are pushing back, but the courts only have moral suasion at this point. It's not clear where the forces, the military and police forces, are going to line up should it come to what many of us are seeing as this rather imminent peril. I mean, my own background is studying U.S. and German history, for those of you who don't know. And if I didn't introduce you to be myself before, I'm the president of One Pair of States. I'm here in Washington, D.C. I'm a citizen lobbyist. And if I haven't shared this before, I could just tell you that it's very difficult sledding on Capitol Hill. It's very difficult to get meetings. It's very difficult to get responses, even to emails, phone calls. So I make myself present as much as possible, show up at offices and occasionally catch a staff member with a conversation. But basically, the message that I'm getting from both Republicans and Democrats is that there's not likely to be anything significant done on healthcare in the foreseeable future. We all know that the radical privatization is being pushed out by Dr. Oz and Bobby Kennedy, and that's a place in which we need to continue to fight to stop that and reverse that the radical privatization of Medicare through Medicare Advantage and other tools and instruments. We need to work with our allies on protecting what does exist at the same time that we push out on single payer bills. The Medicare for All bill, if you don't know, is going to be dropped on April 29th. This is the last week of a 2-week recess. So if you haven't yet reached out to your member in the House and the Senate, I know that Permilla's bill, the House bill, is out. I don't know the timing of when Bernie's bill is going to be out, but the Medicare for All bill is going to be out April 29th. It's the State-Based Universal Health Care Act, the one that we center a lot of our work on at One Pair of States with Ro Khanna in the House and Ed Markey in the Senate. That legislation is due to be dropped sometime, we're being told, in June. So there's a very good chance that we'll be getting what's called a Dear Colleague co-sponsorship memo, something that members send around to other members before the bill itself is introduced, giving people an opportunity to sign on so their name will be at the top, will be at the top of the bill itself when the bill is introduced. This last session, we got up to 30 co-sponsors, which is a more than a 50% improvement over what we'd previously done. And of course, we were able to get a Senate bill introduced for the very first time. Our push at this point is to get hearings, if at all possible. We are reaching out. I'm reaching out in particular and asking others to help me to reach out to potential Republican allies in the Senate, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, perhaps others. And then in the House, a number of swing state House members, I believe 18 of whom won their reelection despite Kamala Harris winning those districts. So those vulnerable members are low-hanging fruit as far as I'm concerned, and are better prospects. So we do have some conversations, but they've largely frozen. They've largely come to a halt right now because of the overriding circumstances where you have a president who signs all these executive orders, which effectively makes him the legislative branch, and the Supreme Court and the other courts have been functioning in absence of legislative function coming out of Congress. So it's a dysfunctional situation, but one in which we need to stay together. We need to continue building, as Andre said, build out support with labor, build out support with small and middle-sized businesses that are getting crushed in this healthcare environment. Businesses should be natural allies of ours, and we need to just get past those sort of ideological barriers and to center on what it is that's going to be healthiest for our families, our businesses, our communities. And center the conversation there. So I'll stop for now and say that we do have upcoming meetings. We encourage people to support the work that we're doing. Mike, do you need to jump in and make any announcements that you can think of? Our next Tuesday, second Tuesday meeting in May.
Right. I'll have to look to see who we have lined up.
That's the next time that we'll be coming together, next time that we'll be convening. And then we've got the discussion earlier about Oregon and Washington coming together. There are tentative plans for a meeting, I believe, in September, and there are tentative plans for a national meeting in Denver, right, Mike? In
Yes.
August? Do you want to announce
August,
that?
yes, August 1st and 2nd, that's a Friday and Saturday. Lydia Guzman and Jeannie Nicholson, Senator Nicholson, are working in the Denver area to help prepare for that. It will be at the Kirk UCC Church in Bonnie Bray, part of Denver. So it is a hybrid meeting. We expect about half people will be able to come in person and the other half online. We're now just in the process of choosing speakers and getting some of the logistic details prepared. We just hope everybody who can come will come. It's nice to meet each other online like this, but it's even better, much better, when it's face to face in person.
Right. And also, it's great to see you, Mike. You're just, for the folks who don't know, Mike's just coming off of a surgery, just maybe what, 10 days ago, and you're
Yeah.
up and about. So all the best to your quick healing. A month from now, our third Friday month presenter will be Wendell Potter. We'll have Wendell Potter in-house the third Friday in May. So might want to make a note of that. And Mike, were you able to? Because I'm still unpacking for my trip. Do you have who's presenting on the second Tuesday in May?
I'll come up with it shortly.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to drop my contact information in the chat because I encourage people who haven't connected with me. I like to do inside outside coordinated lobbying and educating of members. And in particular, we do need to get Republicans on board here. And I think a lot of them are just itching to do something to come back into good graces or connection with their own constituents, much as their town halls have all but been banned. This I think is a real opportunity, and I'm going to continue. You know, much as Andre has illustrated and shown us, it really is. It's persistence, absolutely radical persistence. Just don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. That's how we were able to get a Republican chaired single payer hearing in Pennsylvania, the only one that ever happened. That was in 2009, and how we were able to get that bipartisan joint resolution on an economic impact study passed. Just keep showing up and be smart, as Andre and others have demonstrated with language, Jeannie Nicholson. And you know your audience and be able to speak to them in a way that addresses their primary concerns. Mike, do you have that information?
Let's see if I can get it here.
Sorry, I'm just untethered at the moment. We are going into a, a, a another perilous moment. It's on April 20th that was it Pete Hegseth and the Homeland Security secretaries are supposed to report back as to whether Donald Trump has the power to declare martial law and to assemble troops at the border. These things can happen very quickly, as I think many of us know, even from a casual understanding of history in the 1930s in Germany and elsewhere since that time. But we need to stay together. We need to stay connected. We need to be in conversation about how we deal with these situations. Also noting, as somebody who was a labor organizer, that the National Labor Relations Board has been assaulted and the data has been uplifted from there. So anybody who's a labor organizer, as am I, is now potentially in the crosshairs of this regime. So I say this just to be upfront about the reality. You know, I say eyes wide open, not eyes wide shut. We need to make sure that we see what's happening and that we stay in connection with one another. And so, Mike, do you have that info?
No.
Okay. So our second Tuesday is our next gathering. Michael sent around an announcement for that. That's in the month of May, the second Tuesday. It's a 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern time. So make a note of that. We'll be together. And then the third Friday is with Wendell Potter. And then Denver is the meeting of a national meeting of one pair of states. Tentatively or close to firm August 1st and 2nd. And then, Mike, you also have tentative plans to build out something potentially between Oregon and Washington in September, correct?
Yes, Cello and I are working on that, and I'm sorry, Catherine Lewandowski.
Okay, terrific.